Hi, this is Sue from the Mountain Canary Company. Ed's going to visit with you about the mystery of the back cinch. Go ahead, Ed.
Howdy, folks. Thank you all for coming by to visit with us again. Today is a subject that I wanted to talk to you about. It's really interesting, something that's kind of been on our minds, and Sue and I have discussed it a lot. And it really came to light recently when I got into a visit with a friend of mine who's a saddle maker. In fact, he made this saddle here, Terry Wagner, about the rear cinch. A rear cinch is a really interesting piece of business. You either love them or hate them. How we got into it was Terry was telling me that he had one of his clients that had called him about a saddle he made for him back east, and that the darn thing was soaring up the far back on the animal, well into the loin and well past into the area of the flare of the saddle tree. What the heck's going on? He said that tree fit perfectly when they fit it. Now a lot can go on. An animal can gain weight, animal can lose weight. There's all kinds of things that go on from the time you fit a saddle to the time you actually get it and put it in service. So there was the question going on. So Terry threw another question at her. How do you rig this saddle up? How do you hook it up? Because he knew he'd rigged it up like both Robert Eversole and I talked to people about, and that's actually with two latigos and using a soft cinch in the back instead of a leather billet and a leather flank cinch. Well, come to find out, she says, well, I'm setting it up just like everybody around here tells me to set it up. And he said, how's that? And she said, you set that rear cinch up tight. And then you set the front cinch up a little looser. Huh? I said, that is completely backwards. And so as soon as they fixed it, as soon as they went out, the problem's gone, solved. It's not pulling down and eating on their back anymore. A rear cinch can be a real curse for you. It can give your animal some health issues if by chance you don't do it right. In fact, any cinch can do that. But rear cinches can do it pretty quick and easy. There's a school of thought that's floating around, and it's being taught by several clinicianer types, especially the mule people, that you set that rear cinch up tight and then set the front cinch up looser. That's completely backwards, as far, in my opinion, of how it should be. You should go in and set your front cinch up first, snug it up, a couple fingers under it. The rear cinch should be brought up, tightened, to where you can just barely slip your hand underneath it. And then you can go on fine. The rear cinch design is actually to help stabilize anything that's above it, so i.e. top back. And that comes out of some military manuals I've read over the years. And so on a riding saddle, you're the top pack. It'll stabilize it. And if it's put in the right place, it'll also help at times to hold the saddle back. As the animal's belly goes back and starts to rise in the back, if the saddle's in the right place, you can grab where it breaks in the back, I call it behind the break of the belly, and grab that piece back there a little bit past center so that the angle of the body's going up. That'll help at times to hold the saddle forward, back rather, from going forward. But now if that saddle is cranked down in the back, you can have some serious issues to their spine, real serious health issues. And it's amazing these animals are so tolerant when they're being done that. You can only imagine that the animal's back wants to move as they're traveling underneath there. Now if you crank the back of that saddle down so tight that it can't move. What then happens is you're compressing against the vertebrae of the spine and the discs. So how it works is, when a horse or a mule turns, if that horse or a mule turns, say to the left, as that turns to the left, the saddle bars will swing slightly to the right. So the animal basically hinges somewhat underneath that. It doesn't. If your saddle is set up with the rear cinch in the back set properly, it still will move back and forth. But if they can't move back and forth, what they're doing is they're now straining against their spine to make that movement with something clamped on their backs against their spine, which doesn't allow them to turn. So be very careful when you're doing that. Any type of rigging you put on an animal, cinches, breeches, breast collars, cruppers, all that, if they're put on improperly or in the wrong place, they can cause some orthopedic type issues for your animal. It's not a new idea. It's been around a long time. And if you talk to some of your horse or mule chiropractors and so forth, they'll tell you the same thing. So let's take a look. Let's take a little different look on this. I put rear cinches on everything. My riding saddles, my pack saddles, but I never again ever tighten those things up so tight that it's just there snugged up to stop that saddle from misbehaving, so to speak. So we'll take a look first at a pack saddle. I've got a pack saddle here, got a Dardas saddle here. It's on a tree made by Baumgarten Iron Works in Montana. So it's their southwest bar. And as you can see, I got two types of two cinches here. Well, first front cinch is shorter, it's because it's narrower. The back cinch is wider because it goes around her belly. Now, this cinch, this will be addressed in a different YouTube, but this cinch has got some build-up pads in it to fit some anatomy issues. So, what I've done here is I've got them both rigged, and they're hooked together. Oh, they're hooked together, Ed. Well, yeah, because if you don't hook them together, it's with some form of a hobble. What happens is the rear girth will move too far back, and then, my God, if at that time if you cinch that thing up so tight, it's pulling up against their abdomen so bad they can't hardly breathe. They're shoving their diaphragm up. So each side of this saddle has got a hobble on it, and when I make them, they're made to hold this in two different positions, the same position both sides. So basically, it's a very good stabilizer for this saddle. Now over here is my riding saddle. As you can see, let me drop it. As you can see, whoops. There's a cinch on it. Again, it's set up for normal work. Shorter cinches in the front, wider cinches across the back. And in this case, you'll notice that the hobble is in the middle of the saddle. The reason being is there's no reason to have it on the sides here. First off, these are going to be almost two different heights when you get it rigged up, and that one's going to be far more closely together. But this then is set up in the middle.
Get your hand out of the way.
In the middle. So you can. If you'll notice, there's a slide in it. In many cases, there's buckles. Some cases, there's snaps. All of these different things aren't going to bother you here under the belly if by chance you haven't put them in the wrong spot. If you put them underneath against the belly that could be a problem, but this against the webbings are clear. Over here, if I did the same thing and put the hobble in the middle, when I use the lash rope and lash cinch, it would be working up against this type of material. So we don't go there. Just don't go there. Just put the hobbles where they belong. Helps to hold them in place. Helps give you something else to hook your tugs onto to pull the saddle back. Now, this is just a bit of information for you about these rear cinches. Again, they're a curse and a blessing all at the same time. They're not this is not a new system, a new idea. If you go in and study back to the 1870s and 1880s and 1890s and so forth, and get pictures of cowboy saddles all set up, they're all set with double cinches. Also, they're set up that way when you buy one from a catalog. Saddles were sold mostly by catalogs in those days. And in those catalog photographs I've seen, I've never seen one sold with the leather rear cinch. They were all strings. And a good thing about a string cinch is that as it's tightened up and as it moves, there is some give to it. There's a little bit of give to it. Differently from our modern neoprene cinches, they look like a good idea. They probably aren't. And again, all this is Ed's opinion from my experience and having done things the wrong way at times. A neoprene cinch is made with a piece of like approximately 3-inch synthetic strap. Does not give. So when they tighten that sucker up, it's compressing even more with no give. You tighten a string cinch up, there's give to it. That and it'll lay down to the body pretty well, and it actually gives. It gives so much that when you wash a neoprene cinch, a mohair cinch, you have to wash them in exactly the same temperature. You rinse them in the same temperature you washed them in, or you'll have shrinkage. But you'll still get a little bit of shrinkage. Once you put it back on the animal, start tightening up, that shrinkage pulls out. So this is somewhat of a sacrificial giving piece of business. Okay, well I hope that's of some interest to you. I was really upset when Terry told me how far-reaching that I believe a misstated process about tightening up your rear cinch first and then your front cinch, and I know where it came from. I followed the story around far enough over the years to know the guy that started it, and I'm not saying anything about it. It's not my business. But it is my business to warn you folks off something that could hurt your animals. The rear cinch is an important piece of business in my world. The way I feel about it, riding in the high country, riding in any area that's rough, a rear cinch is, I think, very important. And the animal will respond to it, not necessarily negatively. I was running out of a staircase one hot summer day, and I was pulling my string out. I'd taken a trail crew in. I was pulling my string out, and all of a sudden, I was riding little Maudie, and all of a sudden, she started making the dangest noise you ever heard. I've never heard an animal make that noise. It was a grunt, half squeal, half gasp. Good Lord! I thought, I'm still 4 miles or more from the truck and trailer, and I'm thinking, what's going on? For goodness sake, scared the living goodness out of me. Is she going to colic? So I stopped. And I turned her sideways in the trail and stopped, and she did that a couple more times, and then as I went to get down, I looked down to where I was going to step off, and there's my latigo hanging on the ground. My front cinch was on the other side. What had happened was the darn thing, for some unknown reason, they're gremlins, I guess, had untied it. And there she said, so Monty I just slipped off and put it all back together, tightened it up, and stepped up and took off. And that was the darndest thing, though. So the thing was that rear cinch can act at times like she was being gigged in the gut. So when you set it all up, stop and look at it and ask yourself, does this look like a good idea? And from now on, when you hear any advice, especially from me, especially from me, I want you to just step back a foot or two, kick the old brain cells in, and ask yourself, does that make sense? What he just said, does it make sense? Does it sound like there might be a wrinkle in that isn't going to work out? And follow up on that. Try it out and see for yourself. Check it out for yourself. The question about, does your saddle shift from side to side? Well, saddle your pony up or your long-eared buddy up. Have a friend lead them away from you. Have them turn left, have them turn right, and you follow in behind. And watch what that saddle tree does on there. It's not necessarily going to go whack, whack. It could be subtle. Or in some cases, the way the body's built, their bodies are built, it could be quite dramatic. So when you do that, and that's to be done ahead of time before you tighten your rear cinch up, and once you've tightened your rear cinch up to a gentle pressure, go back and follow that around again and take a look and see the impact of that. So anything you hear from me or anyone else giving you advice or information, you always take it with a grain of salt and then go check it out. Remember, you are the one that's responsible for that animal, not me. Okay, folks, thank you all very much for coming by. Sue, is that about enough?
Can I say something?
Go.
Okay, don't let your rear cinch get too loose. You could get a stick in there, something that is really going to give you a really good ride if that stick gets up in that rear cinch, and it'll come with you as that mule or horse is bucking you off.
Or worse than that, you can actually jam that into their intestines. I watched a vet one time on a trailhead trying to sew up a horse that had jammed a stick right up in next to their ribs. Darling?
Not too tight, but not loose, hanging down.
Okay, folks. Thank you all for coming by. I really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next time. But until then, please remember, ride safely, but please ride as often as you can. We'll see you all later. Bye-bye.